I knew sleeping with Christopher Blackwell at the Palmer House Christmas Gala was going to ruin my life. I knew at the moment his hand touched the small of my back, and every logical thought I'd ever had as a corporate lawyer just evaporated into the smell of pine trees and champagne and his cologne that probably cost more than my rent. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known while he was kissing my neck in that hotel suite with Chicago glittering 47 floors below us, was that in 6 weeks I'd be standing in a clinic bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test, and in 7 weeks I'd be sitting across from him watching him choose between me and the $300 million merger his engagement to Victoria Ashford represented. They say one night can't change your life, but they've never had a one-night stand with a billionaire who has everything to lose. Welcome to DramaCoda. This is my story, and trust me, you need to hear every single word of it. Leave a like, and when this is over, rate my story 1 to 10 in the comments because what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. Let me take you back to December 20th, 2023. The Sterling Foundation Christmas Charity Gala. I wasn't supposed to be there. My firm, Henderson and Associates, had bought a table and my boss Margaret had the flu, so she gave me her ticket at 4 in the afternoon, told me to network, told me to make connections, told me this was my chance to rub shoulders with Chicago's elite. I remember standing in front of my closet for an hour trying to find something appropriate, something that said successful corporate lawyer but not trying too hard, and I settled on this emerald green dress I'd bought 2 years ago for my cousin's wedding and never wore again. It fit perfectly. I should have known right then that the universe was setting me up. The Palmer House looked like something out of a Christmas movie. I'm talking massive pine trees decorated with gold ornaments, ice sculptures of angels, champagne towers that seemed to touch the ceiling, and everywhere you looked there were people who'd never worried about money a single day in their lives. I felt like an imposter. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter just to have something to do with my hands, and that's when I saw him. Christopher Blackwell. I'd seen his picture in Forbes, in the Chicago Tribune, on the news when his hotel chain announced another acquisition, but pictures don't capture presence. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair going silver at the temples, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my car, and he had this way of standing that made you think he owned not just the room but the entire building, maybe the whole city. He was 47, I was 34, and he was engaged to Victoria Ashford, daughter of the Ashford real estate empire, an engagement that had been announced 3 months earlier with a picture in every society page showing her massive diamond ring and their perfect smiles. I wasn't planning to talk to him. I was planning to eat some shrimp, network with some mid-level executives, and go home by 10. But the universe had other plans. I was standing by one of those ice sculptures, the angel one, trying to look busy on my phone because I didn't know anyone there, when I heard his voice behind me. Deep, warm, with just a hint of amusement. He said, "Excuse me, is that angel judging me, or is it just the champagne?" I turned around and he was right there, close enough that I could smell that cologne, cedar, and something expensive I couldn't name, and he was smiling at me like we were sharing a private joke. I laughed. I actually laughed. I said, "I think she's judging all of us. This whole event is basically rich people feeling good about themselves for one night." He threw his head back and laughed, really laughed, and said, "Finally, someone honest." We started talking. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. It turned into an hour. Then 2. He told me about growing up in his father's hotels, learning the business from the ground up, how he'd started as a night clerk at 18 just to prove he could do it. I told him about law school, about the student loans I was still paying off, about my tiny apartment in Lincoln Park that cost too much but had a view of the park. He asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. He remembered details. When I mentioned my mother lived in Atlanta, he asked what she did, how often I saw her, if she liked Chicago winters. Nobody ever asked me things like that. The gala was winding down. People were leaving. The band was playing their last song, some slow jazz number, and Christopher looked at me with these gray eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever built and asked if I wanted to get a drink somewhere quieter. I should have said no. I should have thanked him for the conversation, gotten his business card, gone home. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in that entire ballroom, like for the first time in 3 months since his engagement he'd found something real, someone real. I said yes. We went up to one of the suites. He owned the hotel. Of course he owned the hotel. The Blackwell Hotel Group owned 37 luxury properties across North America, and the Palmer House was the flagship. He had a key to a suite on the 47th floor, and we took the elevator up in this charged silence where neither of us was pretending anymore that this was just drinks, just conversation. The suite was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago, a living room bigger than my entire apartment, and a bar that looked like something from a movie. He poured us both bourbon neat, and we stood by those windows watching the city lights and the snow starting to fall, and he told me the truth. His engagement to Victoria was a business arrangement. Their families had been planning it for years. Her father's real estate empire plus his hotel chain equaled the largest luxury property conglomerate in the country, worth billions, unstoppable. He didn't love her. She didn't love him. They were friends. They respected each other. But this was a merger, not a marriage. He said it like he was confessing a crime, like he was ashamed, and I asked him why he was going through with it if he didn't love her. He looked at me and said, because that's what men like me do. We build empires, we make deals, we marry the right people, and we die having never felt anything real. Then he kissed me. I could tell you I resisted. I could tell you I thought about Victoria, about the engagement, about the ethics of what we were doing. But I'd be lying. The moment his lips touched mine, every rational thought disappeared. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We barely made it to the couch. It was desperate and hungry and intense in a way I'd never experienced, like we were both drowning and each other was air. He touched me like I was precious. He said my name like a prayer. And for those few hours in that hotel suite with snow falling outside and Chicago sleeping below us, I let myself believe that maybe this could be something real. I woke up at 5 a.m. He was still asleep, one arm draped across my waist, breathing slow and even. The suite was dark except for the city lights coming through the windows, and reality hit me like cold water. I'd slept with an engaged man. A billionaire engaged man whose wedding was probably already planned, whose fiancé was probably picking out flowers and cake flavors and seating charts. I was the other woman. I was the cliché. I carefully moved his arm, found my dress on the floor, got dressed as quietly as possible. I was almost to the door when I heard his voice, rough with sleep, asking me not to go. I turned around and he was sitting up, sheet pulled around his waist, looking at me with something like desperation. He said, "Please, let me take you to breakfast. Let me explain." I told him there was nothing to explain, that this was a mistake, that we both had lives to get back to. He wrote his private number on hotel stationery and handed it to me. He said, "Call me, please, this wasn't nothing." I took the number. I left. I told myself I'd throw it away. I didn't throw it away. Christmas came and went. I spent it with my mother in Atlanta, and the whole time she was asking about my love life, about why I was 34 and still single, about when she was going to get grandchildren, I was thinking about Christopher. About his hands. About the way he looked at me. About that number folded in my wallet. I told myself to forget it. It was one night. He was engaged. I had self-respect. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was him, even though he didn't have my number, even though there was no way it could be him. New Year's came. I went to a party with some friends from law school, drank too much champagne, kissed a guy at midnight who tasted like regret and bad decisions, went home alone. I kept thinking about Christopher, about what he'd said, about how his engagement was just business, about how he'd asked me to call. It was stupid. It was naive. But I wanted to believe that night had meant something. Then January came, and with it, the nausea. At first I thought it was the flu. I was tired all the time, couldn't keep food down, felt dizzy when I stood up too fast. My paralegal Sarah kept asking if I was okay, if I needed to go home, and I kept saying I was fine, just fighting something off. It didn't occur to me that I could be pregnant. We'd used protection. I was on the pill. I was careful. I was always careful. But the nausea didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. I couldn't drink coffee anymore. The smell made me gag. I couldn't focus in meetings. I fell asleep at my desk twice. Finally, on January 15th, Sarah cornered me in the bathroom and handed me a pregnancy test. She said, "Take this, because either you're pregnant or you have something serious, and either way you need to know." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she was being ridiculous. But somewhere deep down, In a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew. I took the test in a clinic bathroom during my lunch break because I couldn't handle the idea of doing it at home, in my own space, where I'd have to live with the result. I sat on that toilet in a sterile white bathroom that smelled like disinfectant and fear, watching that little plastic stick, and when the second line appeared, pink and undeniable, my whole world tilted. I was pregnant. I was pregnant with Christopher Blackwell's baby. The man I'd spent one night with. The man who was engaged to someone else. The man who was worth $4.7 billion and whose wedding to Victoria Ashford was 3 months away. I threw up in that clinic bathroom, and it wasn't from morning sickness. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour trying to figure out what to do. I could not tell him. I could handle this myself. I made good money, I had savings, I could raise a baby alone. Women did it all the time. He never had to know. His perfect merger could go forward, his empire could expand, and I could just disappear into single motherhood like it had been the plan all along. Or I could tell him. I could call that number I'd kept in my wallet for 6 weeks like a secret, and I could blow up his entire life. His engagement. His business deal. His reputation. Everything. I called him. He answered on the second ring, and the surprise in his voice when he heard it was me made my heart clench. He said Jasmine like he couldn't believe it, like he'd been waiting. He asked where I'd been, why I hadn't called, if I was okay. I didn't let him finish. I said, I need to see you, it's important. Can you meet me today? The warmth in his voice disappeared, replaced by concern. He said, of course, where, when? I gave him the address of a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, neutral territory, somewhere we wouldn't be recognized. He said he'd be there in 30 minutes. He was there in 20. I was sitting in the back corner, nursing a ginger tea because the smell of coffee still made me nauseous when he walked in. He was wearing jeans and a sweater, dressed down, trying not to be noticed, but he still drew eyes. Men like Christopher don't blend in. He saw me and his whole face lit up, this beautiful smile, and he was halfway to my table before he registered my expression. Before he saw that I'd been crying. Before he understood that whatever I was about to tell him wasn't good news. He sat down across from me. He reached for my hand. He said, what's wrong, talk to me. And I just blurted it out like ripping off a band-aid. I said, I'm pregnant, it's yours, I'm sorry. The silence that followed felt like it lasted a year. He pulled his hand back. He sat back in his chair. His face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds: shock, fear, calculation, something that might have been hope, and then this careful blankness that I recognized from courtrooms, from negotiations, from men who'd just been handed a problem they needed to solve. He asked if I was sure. I showed him the test results on my phone, the appointment confirmation, the due date calculation. September 10th. He was quiet for so long I thought he might just stand up and walk out. Instead, he asked what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do. Like it was a business decision. Like we were discussing quarterly projections. I told him the truth. I said, I don't know, I'm terrified, I didn't plan this, but I'm 34 years old and I don't know if I'll get another chance. I told him I'd understand if he wanted nothing to do with it, that I could handle this alone, that I wasn't asking for anything from him. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. He said, you think I'm the kind of man who walks away from his child? I said, I don't know what kind of man you are, Christopher. We spent one night together. He flinched. That hurt him. Good. He asked for time. He said he needed to think, to figure out how to handle this, to talk to Victoria. I laughed at that. I actually laughed. I said, sure, go talk to your fiancé about your pregnant mistress. I'm sure that'll go great. He said she'll understand. This is complicated, we can figure this out. I asked him what there was to figure out. He was engaged. He had a $300 million merger riding on that engagement. I was pregnant with his baby. There was no figuring this out. There was only choosing. He promised to call me the next day. He left. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, drinking cold ginger tea, wondering how my life had become a soap opera. He didn't call the next day. Or the day after that. Or the day after that. 1 week of silence. Then 2. Then 3. I was 8 weeks pregnant, starting to show just a little, still throwing up every morning, and Christopher Blackwell had ghosted me. I told myself I shouldn't be surprised. He'd made his choice. He'd chosen the merger, the engagement, the empire. I was the inconvenient secret that needed to disappear, and disappear I would. I made an appointment with my doctor. I started researching maternity leave policies. I looked at my savings account and did the math on daycare and tried not to panic about raising a child alone in one of the most expensive cities in America. Then, on February 8th, he showed up at my office. No warning. No call. Just Christopher Blackwell walking into Henderson and Associates at 2 in the afternoon like he owned the place, asking the receptionist for me, causing Sarah and half the other paralegals to nearly have heart attacks because everyone recognized him. My boss Margaret called my extension and said in this tight voice that I had a visitor in the lobby and would I please come handle it because we couldn't have Christopher Blackwell in our waiting room. I walked out there and he looked terrible. Tired. Stressed. Older than he had at Christmas. He said, "We need to talk, please." I took him to the conference room before anyone could start taking pictures. He told me he'd spent 3 weeks trying to find a way to make this work. To keep his engagement, honor the merger, and still be present for our baby. He'd talked to lawyers. He'd talked to financial advisors. He'd even talked to Victoria. She'd been surprisingly understanding, he said. She'd suggested we could make this work as a modern family arrangement. He could marry her, I could be the mother of his child, they could set up a trust fund, make sure I was taken care of, everyone could move forward with minimal scandal. I looked at him like he'd lost his mind. I said, "So I'm supposed to be what, your baby mama on the side while you play happy couple with Victoria?" He said, "It's not like that. We'd all be adults about this. You'd want for nothing." I asked if he'd even heard himself. If he understood what he was asking. He was asking me to accept scraps. To accept being hidden. To accept raising our child as a secret, a complication, a problem managed by lawyers and NDAs and trust funds. He was asking me to disappear into the margins of his perfect life. I told him to get out. He tried to argue. He said he was trying to do the right thing, to protect everyone, to be responsible. I said the right thing would be to choose, to be honest, to stop trying to have everything. I told him I didn't need his money. I didn't need his lawyers. I didn't need him. I could do this alone. He asked if that's really what I wanted, and I said what I wanted was for him to love me enough to choose me, but that clearly wasn't happening. So yes, alone was better than being a secret. He left. I cried in that conference room for 20 minutes before I pulled myself together enough to go back to work. Sarah brought me tissues and didn't ask questions. February turned into March. I was 12 weeks pregnant. I'd told my mother, who'd been surprisingly supportive despite her initial shock. I'd told my boss, who'd been less supportive but legally couldn't fire me. I'd told my friends, who'd had various reactions ranging from congratulations to "Are you insane?" I hadn't heard from Christopher. I told myself that was fine. I was moving forward. I was making plans. I was going to be a single mother, and it was going to be okay. Then Victoria showed up. March 15th. Tuesday morning. I was in my office reviewing a contract when my secretary buzzed and said I had a visitor without an appointment. Before I could ask who, Victoria Ashford walked through my door like she owned it. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, effortlessly elegant in a cream pantsuit that probably cost $5,000, with that massive engagement ring catching the light. She smiled at me, and it wasn't warm. She said, "Hello, Jasmine, we need to talk about Christopher." She sat down without being invited. She pulled a folder out of her designer bag. She laid it on my desk. She said inside this folder is a check for $2 million and a non-disclosure agreement. The check is yours if you sign the NDA and agree to never contact Christopher again, never claim paternity publicly, and never seek any support or involvement from him. She said it calmly, like she was discussing the weather. Like she was offering me a gift. I opened the folder. The check was real. $2 million made out to Jasmine Washington. The NDA was 30 pages of legal language that basically erased me and my baby from Christopher's life forever. I looked at Victoria and asked if Christopher sent her. She smiled again, that cold smile. She said Christopher is a smart man who understands the value of discretion. She said he'd authorized this offer and hoped I'd be reasonable. She said $2 million was more than generous, more than most women in my position would ever see, and if I truly cared about my child, I'd take it and provide them with a stable, Comfortable life far away from the media circus that would happen if I tried to claim Christopher publicly. I asked her if she'd practiced this speech, or if being a cold-hearted which came naturally. Her smile disappeared. She leaned forward. She said, "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to explain this once. Christopher and I are getting married in June. Our families have been planning this for years. There are contracts, agreements, business arrangements that depend on this union. You are a complication, a mistake, a problem that needs to be solved. I'm solving it. You can take this money and disappear quietly, or I can make your life very difficult. I have lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. I have connections that reach into every major law firm in Chicago, including this one. Think about your career. Think about your future. Think about your child. $2 million buys a lot of security. Pride buys nothing. OMG, it's getting emotional over here. Tell me in the comments the emotion you're feeling right now. Happy, sad, curious? It's about to take on a whole new level." I picked up that folder. I picked up that check. And I ripped it in half. Then in quarters. Then into tiny pieces that fluttered onto my desk like snow. I said, "Tell Christopher that if he wants to talk about our baby, he can call me himself. Tell him that I don't want his money. Tell him that his child deserves a father who chooses them, not a payoff and an NDA. And tell him that if he marries you, if he goes through with this loveless merger, he's going to regret it for the rest of his life." Victoria stood up. She smoothed her pantsuit. She said, "You're making a mistake." I said, "Maybe, but at least it's my mistake." She left. I sat in my office surrounded by shredded check pieces and tried to stop shaking. That night, at 11:30, Christopher called. He was angry. Really angry. He said, "What the hell did you say to Victoria?" She came home furious, saying you ripped up the check, insulted her, threatened me. I said I didn't threaten anyone, I told the truth. He said, "You don't understand the position I'm in, the pressure, the expectations." I said, "Then help me understand, Christopher. Tell me why a $300 million business deal is worth more than your child. Tell me why you're choosing a woman you don't love over a woman you spent one magical night with. Tell me why you're such a coward." Silence. Then his voice, quieter, broken. He said, "I'm not a coward, I'm trapped." I said, "We're all trapped by something. The question is what you're willing to do to get free." He said, "My father built this company from nothing. My family's legacy depends on this merger. Hundreds of jobs depend on this merger." I said, "And what about the tiny human depending on you? What about them?" More silence. Then he said, "I need to see you." I said, "When?" He said, "Now." I said, "It's almost midnight." He said, "I know, I'm outside your building." I looked out my apartment window and there he was, standing in the street in the rain that had started falling, looking up. I told him he was crazy. He said, "Probably, but I'm not leaving until you come down." I threw on a jacket and went down. We stood in the rain on a Chicago sidewalk in March, getting soaked, and he told me everything. He told me about growing up with a father who measured success in dollars and properties. He told me about the expectations, the pressure, the way he'd been groomed since childhood to take over the empire. He told me about Victoria, how they'd been friends since they were kids, how the engagement had always been inevitable, how he'd accepted it because that's what you do in families like his. He told me about the gala, how he'd seen me by that ice sculpture and felt something he'd never felt with Victoria, something real and terrifying and alive. He told me about the last 6 weeks, how he'd been trying to find a solution that didn't require him to choose, because choosing felt impossible. I told him that's the problem. Life is about choosing. Love is about choosing. Being a father is about choosing. You can't have everything. You can't keep everyone happy. You can't build an empire and a family on compromise and business arrangements. At some point, you have to decide what matters. He asked what I wanted from him. I said, "I want you to choose. Not the money, not the merger, not the empire. You. I want you to choose what you actually want, not what everyone expects. I want you to look at your life and ask yourself if you're living it or if it's living you. And then I want you to call me when you have an answer, because I'm not going to be your secret. I'm not going to raise your child on the margins of your perfect life. I'm all in or I'm all out, and you need to decide which one you can live with." He kissed me in that rain, desperate and hungry and sad, and then he left. I went back upstairs, changed into dry clothes, and cried myself to sleep. 3 days later, I saw the announcement. Christopher Blackwell and Victoria Ashford had moved their wedding up. They were getting married in April instead of June. A small private ceremony. Family only. The merger was going forward ahead of schedule. He'd made his choice. I blocked his number. I blocked his email. I told Sarah that if he showed up at the office again, to tell him I wasn't available. I threw myself into work, into preparing for the baby, into building a life that didn't include him. I was 16 weeks pregnant. I had an ultrasound scheduled. I was going to find out the sex of the baby. I was going to do this alone, and I was going to be fine. The ultrasound was on April 3rd. I went alone. The technician was this sweet older woman who kept saying, "Oh, how wonderful. Is Dad going to join us?" And I kept saying, "No, it's just me." She squeezed that cold gel on my belly and moved the wand around, and suddenly there it was, my baby on the screen, tiny and perfect and real. She asked if I wanted to know the sex. I said yes. She smiled and said, "Congratulations, it's a girl." A girl. I was having a daughter. I stared at that screen and watched my daughter move, watched her tiny heart beating, and I felt this overwhelming wave of love and terror and determination. This little girl deserved everything. She deserved a father who chose her. She deserved a life that wasn't built on secrets and compromises. She deserved better than what I was giving her. I was sitting in my car in the clinic parking lot, crying and looking at the ultrasound pictures, when someone knocked on my window. I looked up and it was Christopher. He looked terrible. Worse than he looked in February. Like he hadn't slept in weeks. I rolled down the window and said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Sarah told me you had an appointment today. I wanted to be here. I wanted to see." I said, "You gave up that right when you chose the merger." He said, "I didn't choose anything. I'm dying inside." I said, "Then get a divorce. Leave Victoria. Choose us." He said, "I can't. The wedding is in 2 weeks. The contracts are signed. If I back out now, the lawsuits alone will destroy both companies." I said, "Then I guess you made your choice." He said, "Jasmine, please." I said, "Please what, Christopher? What do you want from me?" He said, "I want you to wait for me." I said, "Wait for what?" He said, "Wait until after the wedding. Wait until I can figure out how to untangle this mess. Wait until I can find a way to be with you without destroying everything." I laughed. It was bitter and hurt and angry. I said, "You want me to wait while you marry another woman? You want me to raise your daughter alone while you play happy couple with Victoria? You want me to put my life on hold so you can have both?" He said, "It's not like that." I said, "Then tell me what it's like, because from where I'm sitting, you're asking me to accept crumbs while you have your cake and eat it too." He didn't have an answer for that. I handed him one of the ultrasound pictures through the window. I said, "Her name is going to be Noelle, because I met you at Christmas, and even though you broke my heart, you gave me her. I said you can be in her life or not, that's your choice, but I'm done waiting. I'm done hoping. I'm done breaking my own heart over a man who won't choose me." Then I rolled up my window and drove away. I saw his wedding announcement 2 weeks later. Small ceremony in the Blackwell family estate. Victoria looked beautiful in a designer gown. Christopher looked like a man at a funeral. The business sections all praised the merger. The Blackwell-Ashford Alliance, they called it. The future of luxury hospitality. Nobody mentioned the pregnant corporate lawyer he'd left behind. April turned into May. May turned into June. I was 6 months pregnant, showing significantly now, waddling more than walking. I transformed my second bedroom into a nursery. Pink walls, white crib, stuffed animals I'd bought on impulse at Target. My mother came to visit for a week and helped me prepare. She didn't mention Christopher except once, when she said, "Honey, some men are too weak to choose the hard thing, even when the hard thing is the right thing." I said, "I know, Mama." She said, "You're stronger than he is, and that baby girl is lucky to have you." I believed her. Most days. June 10th. I was in a deposition at work, 7 months pregnant and feeling every day of it, when my phone started buzzing. Once. Twice. 10 times. I ignored it. When the deposition ended 2 hours later, I had 37 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Something was wrong. I stepped into the hallway and called my mother, and she said in this shaking voice, "Honey, turn on the news." I pulled up a news site on my phone and there it was, the headline that changed everything. Blackwell heir calls off 3-month-old marriage. Citing irreconcilable differences and personal matters, Christopher Blackwell files for annulment. I read it 3 times. 4. 5. I couldn't breathe. The article said Christopher had filed for annulment that morning, less than 90 days after the wedding. Victoria was reportedly shocked. The families were in crisis talks. The merger was in jeopardy. Anonymous sources said Christopher had been struggling with the marriage from day one, that he'd been distant, distracted, unhappy. Other sources mentioned rumors of another woman. A pregnancy. A scandal. My phone rang. Christopher. I answered. He said, I'm coming over, we need to talk. I said, what did you do? He said what I should have done in January. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Noelle. I'm choosing us. I said, you got married, Christopher. You actually married her. He said, I know, and I regretted it before we even cut the cake. I've spent 3 months in hell trying to pretend I didn't make the biggest mistake of my life. I filed for annulment this morning. It's over. Victoria and I are done. I said, what about the merger? He said, it's complicated, there'll be lawsuits, we'll lose some of the benefits, but the companies aren't going to collapse. I said, what about your family? He said, they're furious, but they'll get over it. I said, what about Victoria? He said she's hurt and angry and she has every right to be, but she also admitted she never loved me either. We were both trying to force something that was never real. I said, what about me, Christopher? What about the 3 months I spent alone, pregnant with your baby, thinking you chose money over us? He said, I'm sorry. It's not enough, I know it's not enough, but I'm sorry. I was a coward. I was weak. I let fear and duty and expectations control me instead of choosing what I actually wanted. But I'm done with that. I'm done pretending. I love you, Jasmine. I fell in love with you the night we met, and I've been in love with you every day since. And I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. I want to be with you. I want to be a father to Noelle. I want to build something real, not a merger, not an arrangement, but something that matters. I was crying. Ugly crying. 7 months pregnant. Standing in my law firm's hallway, sobbing into my phone. I said, you hurt me. He said, I know. I said, you made me feel worthless. He said, I know. I said, you married someone else. He said, I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making that up to you if you'll let me. I said, come over. We'll talk. He was at my apartment in 15 minutes. We sat on my couch, this beat-up IKEA thing that was too small for him, and he held my hand and told me everything. The wedding had been a nightmare. He'd stood at that altar looking at Victoria and thinking about me. The honeymoon had been worse. They'd gone to the Maldives and spent 7 days pretending to be happy while photograph/RS took pictures for magazines. He said he'd called his lawyer the day they got back and started asking about annulments. It had taken 3 months to work through the legal issues, the business complications, the family drama, but he'd done it. He was free. I asked if he expected me to just forgive him, to forget the last 6 months, to act like he hadn't chosen money and duty over me and our daughter. He said no. He said he expected me to be angry, to not trust him, to make him prove every day that he was serious. He said he expected to work for this, to earn back my trust, to show me through actions, not words, that he was the man I deserved. I told him I needed time. I told him I couldn't just jump back into whatever we'd been building before he destroyed it. I told him we could start with co-parenting, with him being involved with Noelle, and we'd see where things went from there. He agreed immediately. He said, whatever you need, however long you need, I'm not going anywhere. July came. Then August. Christopher was at every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every prenatal class, looking hilariously out of place in a room full of women learning about breathing exercises. He helped me finish the nursery. He bought a crib that cost more than my first car and put it together himself, swearing at the instructions and making me laugh. He came over for dinner 3 times a week, bringing takeout from expensive restaurants and eating it on paper plates because I refused to cook while pregnant. He didn't push. He didn't pressure. He just showed up. Slowly, carefully, I started to forgive him. The lawsuits from the annulment were brutal. Victoria's family sued for breach of contract. The merger fell apart. Christopher lost about $60 million in the settlement, and several business opportunities disappeared overnight. His family was furious. His mother wouldn't speak to him for months. His father called him irresponsible and reckless. The business media had a field day. But you know what Christopher said when I asked if he regretted it? He said, "The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." August 15th. I was 36 weeks pregnant, huge and uncomfortable and ready to meet my daughter. Christopher and I were having dinner at my apartment, Thai food because it was the only thing that didn't give me heartburn, and he asked if he could say something serious. I said, "Sure," bracing myself. He pulled out a small box and my heart stopped. He said, "Before you panic, this isn't what you think." He opened it and inside was a silver bracelet, delicate and beautiful, with a single charm, a tiny letter N for Noel. He said, "I know I messed this up, I know I did everything in the wrong order, but I want you to know something. When I'm ready to ask you the real question, the forever question, I'll do it right. I'll make sure you never doubt that you're my first choice, my only choice. But right now, I just want you to have this, to remember that you and Noel are everything to me." I cried. Again. Pregnancy had turned me into a walking tears factory. I let him put the bracelet on my wrist and I said thank you. He kissed my forehead and said thank you for giving me a second chance. September came, and with it labor. September 7th. 3 days before my due date. I was at work finishing up some files before my maternity leave when my water broke in the middle of a meeting. Sarah rushed me to the hospital while calling Christopher, who answered on the first ring and said, "I'm on my way. Don't have that baby without me." I laughed through a contraction and said, "I'll try." Labor was 23 hours of hell. 23 hours of pain and fear, and Christopher holding my hand through all of it, letting me scream at him, letting me blame him for getting me pregnant, never once leaving. The nurses kept asking if he was my husband, and I kept saying no, he's the father, and they'd give us these knowing looks that said, "Honey, that man loves you." Around hour 18, exhausted and in pain, I told Christopher I couldn't do it. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. You can do anything." And somehow, I believed him. Noelle Marie Washington was born on September 8th at 7:42 in the morning, weighing 7 pounds 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's gray eyes. They placed her on my chest and I fell in love instantly, completely, overwhelmingly. Christopher was crying, actually crying, touching her tiny hand with one finger like she might break. He said, "She's perfect." I said, "Yeah, she is." He said, "Thank you for her. Thank you for not giving up on me." I said, "Don't make me regret it." The first few weeks were chaos. Noelle didn't sleep. Neither did I. Christopher moved into my guest room without asking, just showed up one day with suitcases and said, "You need help, I'm staying." I was too tired to argue. He learned how to change diapers, how to swaddle, how to heat bottles at 3 in the morning. He walked her around the apartment when she wouldn't stop crying, singing off-key lullabies that somehow worked. He was a natural father, patient and gentle and devoted. Watching him with Noelle melted something in me that I'd been keeping frozen since he'd married Victoria. October came. Noelle was 6 weeks old. Christopher and I were sitting on the couch at 2 in the morning, both half asleep while Noelle nursed, and he said, "I love you." Just like that. Simple and true. I looked at him and said, "What?" He said, "I love you, Jasmine. I loved you at Christmas. I loved you through all my mistakes. I loved you through the annulment and the lawsuits and every day since. I love the way you are with Noelle. I love how strong you are. I love how you called me on my cowardice. I love how you make me want to be better. I love you. And I know I don't deserve it after everything I put you through, but I'm hoping maybe you could love me back." I said, "I already do, you idiot." He kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. Noelle made a little sound between us and we both laughed. We took it slow. We'd been through too much to rush. But slowly, carefully, we built something real. He officially claimed paternity, put his name on her birth certificate. He set up a trust fund for her, not to buy my silence but to ensure she'd always be taken care of. He introduced me to his family, which went about as badly as expected. His mother was cold. His father was dismissive. His sister was the only one who seemed genuinely happy for him. But Christopher didn't care. He said, "You and Noelle are my family now. Everyone else has to deal with it." In November, he asked me to move in with him. Not to the family estate, but to a penthouse he'd bought in River North, huge and modern with floor-to-ceiling windows and a nursery that made mine look like a closet. I said, "It's too fast." He said, "We have a baby together. We're already living together in your tiny apartment. How is this different?" I said, "It just is." He said, "Okay, then move in as co-parents. We'll have separate rooms, no pressure." I said, "You promise no pressure?" He said, "I promise. I'm just tired of sleeping on your lumpy guest bed." I moved in December 1st. By December 15th, the separate room situation had dissolved, and I was sleeping in his bed, wrapped in his arms, feeling safe for the first time in a year. Christmas came full circle. December 20th, exactly 1 year since that gala. Christopher had planned something special. He'd rented out the same suite at the Palmer house, the one where we'd first made love, where Noelle had been conceived. He'd filled it with white roses and candles and had dinner catered from the same restaurant where we'd had our first real conversation. Noelle was with my mother for the night, and it was just us, recreating that first night but better, more real. After dinner, standing by those same floor-to-ceiling windows watching snow fall over Chicago, he got down on one knee. He said, "A year ago tonight, I met you and my whole life changed. I was living someone else's life, following someone else's plan, being someone I didn't want to be. You woke me up. You made me brave enough to choose myself, to choose what mattered. I made so many mistakes. I hurt you. I wasted time. But if you'll have me, if you'll let me, I promise to spend the rest of my life choosing you every single day. Jasmine Washington, will you marry me?" The ring was perfect. Emerald-cut diamond, simple and elegant, nothing like the massive rock Victoria had worn. It was me. He knew me. I said yes. Of course I said yes. We got married 3 months later. Small ceremony in my mother's backyard in Atlanta, just family and close friends. No merger. No business arrangement. Just love. Noelle was our flower girl, 9 months old and wobbly but adorable in a white dress. Christopher's family came, begrudgingly, and even his mother managed to smile during the ceremony. Victoria sent a gift, a beautiful silver picture frame with a note that said, "Congratulations, you won." I think she meant it as an insult, but I chose to take it as acknowledgement. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy with Noelle and my mother, because we couldn't imagine leaving her behind. We visited Rome, Florence, Venice. We ate too much pasta and drank too much wine, and Christopher bought Noelle tiny Italian outfits that she outgrew in weeks. It wasn't the glamorous adults-only honeymoon you see in magazines, but it was perfect for us. Life wasn't a fairy tale after that. We fought sometimes. About money, about his family, about how to raise Noelle, about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes. The lawsuits from the annulment dragged on for 2 more years. The business took hits. Christopher's relationship with his father remained strained. But we worked through it. Together. As partners. As equals. Noelle turned 2, then 3. She was smart and stubborn and had her father's eyes in my attitude. Christopher was an incredible father, present and involved in ways his own father never had been. He coached her t-ball team. He read her bedtime stories every night. He let her paint his nails pink and wear princess crowns at breakfast. He broke the cycle. When Noelle was 4, we had another baby. A son we named James, after my father who'd passed when I was young. Christopher cried at the ultrasound, at the birth, at every milestone. He said he couldn't believe he almost missed this, almost chose a merger over a family. I said, "But you didn't, that's what matters." He said, "I'll never stop being grateful that you didn't give up on me." I'm 41 now. Christopher is 54. We've been married 7 years. Noelle is 8, James is 4, and I'm 3 months pregnant with our third. Another surprise, but a welcome one. Christopher's hair is more gray than dark now. My law career survived the scandal, and I made partner 3 years ago. We live in that River North penthouse with a view of Chicago, the city where we met, where we fell apart, where we came back together. Sometimes I think about that night at the gala. About the woman I was, successful but lonely, careful but unfulfilled. About the choice I made to go upstairs with a man I barely knew, a choice that seemed reckless and wrong but turned out to be the beginning of everything. About how one night can change your entire life if you're brave enough to let it. Christopher asked me recently if I ever regret how complicated things got, if I wish we'd met under different circumstances. I told him the truth. I said no because the hard parts made us who we are. The mistakes taught you how to choose. The pain taught me how to forgive. The waiting taught us both that love is worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. He said, "I love you." I said, "I love you too." Noel ran in asking for a snack. James followed asking why the sky is blue. Our life is loud and messy and chaotic and absolutely nothing like I planned. It's perfect. You want to know what I learned from all of this? What I'd tell anyone facing an impossible choice, a complicated situation, a love that seems too hard. I tell them this. Choose the hard thing if it's the right thing. Choose honesty over comfort. Choose love over security. Choose the life you actually want over the life everyone expects you to have. It won't be easy. There will be consequences. There will be people who judge you, people who don't understand, people who think you made the wrong choice. But you know what's worse than facing those consequences? Living a lie. Spending your life wondering what if. Looking at your reflection and not recognizing the person staring back. Christopher could have stayed with Victoria. He could have kept the merger, avoided the lawsuits, maintained his family's approval. He could have hidden me and Noel in the margins of his perfect life. He would have been miserable, but he would have been safe. Instead, he chose the hard thing. He chose to blow up his engagement, face the consequences, lose millions of dollars, disappoint his family, and rebuild his life around what actually mattered. Was it the right choice? Look at our family. Look at the way he lights up when Noelle shows him her homework. Look at the way he holds James when he has nightmares. Look at the way he touches my growing belly with wonder. You tell me if it was the right choice. And me? I could have taken that $2 million. I could have signed that NDA, disappeared, raised Noelle alone with blood money and secrets. I could have accepted being hidden, being less than, being the mistake that got managed. Instead, I chose my worth. I chose to believe I deserved better than scraps. I chose to demand that the man I loved choose me back. Was it risky? Absolutely. I could have ended up alone, a single mother with no support, watching Christopher live his perfect life with Victoria. But I didn't. Because when you know your worth, when you stand firm in what you deserve, sometimes, if you're lucky, the universe rewards that courage. I think about all the women who've been in similar situations, who've loved powerful men, gotten pregnant at inconvenient times, been offered money to disappear. I think about how many of them took the money, took the easy way, took what they could get because they didn't believe they deserved better. I don't judge them. Sometimes survival means accepting less than you deserve. But if you're in that situation, if you're facing that choice, I want you to know something. You are worth more than hush money. Your child is worth more than a trust fund and an absent father. Your love is worth more than being someone's secret. Don't let anyone, no matter how rich, how powerful, how connected, convince you to accept less than you deserve. And to the men out there who are facing similar choices, who are caught between duty and love, between expectation and truth, between the life you're supposed to have and the life you actually want. Choose. Please, for the love of God, choose. Don't string people along while you try to have everything. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't hide behind lawyers and NDAs and business arrangements. Be brave enough to choose what matters, even if it costs you, even if it disappoints people, even if it's hard. Because the alternative, living a lie, pretending to be happy while your real life passes you by, that's not living. That's existing. And you, your partner, your children, you all deserve better than that. I learned that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts or fairy tale moments. It's about choosing each other every day, even on the days when it's hard, especially on the days when it's hard. It's about showing up. It's about being honest. It's about saying I'm scared but I'm here anyway. Christopher and I didn't start with perfect love. We started with chemistry and attraction in one magical night. Everything that came after, the real love, that was built in the hard moments. In his choice to file for annulment. In my choice to forgive him. In the 3 in the morning feedings and the newborn chaos and the fights we worked through instead of walked away from. That's where real love lives. Not in the fairy tale, but in the choices you make when the fairy tale ends and real life begins. And Noelle? My Christmas miracle baby who started all of this? She saved me. She gave me purpose. She made me brave. She taught me what unconditional love feels like, what I'm capable of, what I deserve. Every time I look at her, I see the best decision I ever made. Not sleeping with Christopher at that gala, though that started everything. The best decision was keeping her. Choosing to be her mother. Refusing to hide her or be ashamed of her, or let anyone make her feel like she was a mistake. She wasn't a mistake. She was the universe's way of telling me to stop playing small, to stop accepting less, to start living the life I was meant for. So if you're watching this and you're facing an impossible situation, if you're pregnant and scared, if you're in love with someone who won't choose you, if you're trying to decide between safe and true, listen to me. Choose true. Choose yourself. Choose the life where you look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. Choose the hard conversations, the scary choices, the uncertain futures. Choose to believe you deserve better. Because you do. I promise you do. And sometimes if you're brave enough to choose yourself first, if you're strong enough to demand what you deserve, if you're willing to walk away from less than you're worth, sometimes the universe rewards that courage. Sometimes the person you love wakes up. Sometimes they choose you back. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible. Sometimes the story that started with heartbreak ends with a family and a life and a love that's real. That's what happened to me. But even if it hadn't, even if Christopher had never filed for annulment, even if I'd raised Noelle alone, it still would have been the right choice. Because I'd have been free. I'd have been authentic. I'd have been living my truth instead of someone else's lie. And that's worth more than all the money, all the security, all the comfort in the world. Christopher walked in on me recording this, actually. He wanted to know what I was doing. I told him I was telling our story. He asked why. I said because someone out there needs to hear it, needs to know that complicated situations can have happy endings, that mistakes can become miracles, that it's never too late to choose what matters. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Make sure you tell them I was an idiot and you were a saint." I said, "Oh, trust me, I am." But here's the thing he doesn't know. The thing I haven't told him yet. This third baby we're having? It's twins. Girls. I found out at the ultrasound last week, and I've been keeping it secret, waiting for the perfect moment to tell him. 2 more daughters. 2 more reasons to keep choosing each other. 2 more chances to get it right. I'm going to tell him tonight over dinner, probably make him cry again because he's a softie despite the billionaire thing. And then we're going to figure out how to fit 2 more cribs in that nursery, and argue about names and prepare for even more chaos. Life is messy. Love is complicated. Families are loud and imperfect and nothing like the magazines. But it's real. It's mine. It's ours. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not for $2 million, not for an easier story, not for a fairy tale that looks perfect but feels empty. One more thing before I close this out, because I know some of you are thinking it. Some of you are thinking, but he married someone else? How did you forgive that? How do you trust him? Fair question. I forgive him because I understand why he did it. He was raised in a world where duty comes before desire, where family expectations are law, where you don't get to choose your own life. He was brave enough to break out of that, eventually. He made the wrong choice, yes, but then he corrected it. He blew up his life to choose us. And trust? Trust is rebuilt in small moments. In him showing up every day. In him being present with our kids. In him never once making me feel like I'm less important than his business, his family's approval, his legacy. Trust is earned, and he's earned mine back. But let me be clear. If you're in a situation where someone keeps choosing other people over you, where they keep promising change but never changing, where they keep asking you to wait while they live their life without you in it, that's different. That's not someone who made a mistake and corrected it. That's someone who wants to keep you as an option while they explore other options. And you deserve better than being someone's backup plan. You deserve to be someone's first choice, their only choice, their obvious choice. Don't settle for less. I almost did, and it would have destroyed me. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry at Victoria. If I blame her for accepting Christopher's proposal, for trying to buy my silence, for fighting to keep a man who didn't love her. Honestly? No. I feel sorry for her. She was raised in the same world Christopher was, where marriages are mergers and love is optional. She thought she was doing the right thing, following the plan, building an empire. She didn't know that empires mean nothing if you're empty inside. I hope she found someone who loves her for real. I hope she learned the same lesson Christopher did, that power and money and prestige are hollow without truth and connection and love. I even sent her a Christmas card last year. She didn't respond, but maybe someday she will. The business world still talks about Christopher's annulment. It's cited in articles about family businesses and arranged marriages and the cost of breaking tradition. He's been invited to speak at conferences about choosing authenticity over expectations. He always says yes. He tells our story with my permission, because he thinks it might help other people trapped in lives they didn't choose. He's become this unlikely advocate for living your truth, which is hilarious because 7 years ago he was the poster child for doing what you're told. People change. If they want to. If they're brave enough. If they have the right reason. My law firm weathered the scandal too. There were whispers at first about the pregnant lawyer who broke up a billionaire's wedding. But then I kept my head down, did excellent work, proved I was more than a tabloid story. I made partner based on merit, not drama. My colleagues respect me. My clients trust me. I built my reputation back, piece by piece, case by case. If you're worried that making hard choices will ruin your career, it might. Temporarily. But if you're good at what you do, if you're authentic, if you work hard, you can rebuild. And the career you rebuild on truth will be stronger than the one you built on pretending. Noelle knows the basics of her origin story. We've told her an age-appropriate version. She knows Mommy and Daddy met at a Christmas party. She knows they had some complicated grown-up stuff to figure out. She knows Daddy made some mistakes but fixed them. She knows she's loved beyond measure by both of us. When she's older, when she can understand nuance and complexity, we'll tell her the whole truth. About the engagement, the wedding, the annulment, all of it. We'll tell her because we want her to learn that people aren't perfect, that mistakes don't define you, that choosing to do the right thing even when it's hard is what matters. We'll tell her because we don't want any secrets in our family. Secrets are what almost destroyed us. Truth is what saved us. James doesn't know any of this yet. He's 4. He just knows he has the best dad in the world who plays dinosaurs and builds forts and never misses bedtime. That's enough for now. Let him be little. Let him think the world is simple and people are good and families are easy. He'll learn the complexities soon enough. And these twins I'm carrying? They'll grow up in a family built on honesty, on hard choices, on love that was tested and survived. They'll never doubt they're wanted. They'll never feel like mistakes or complications or problems to be solved. They'll know they're the best things that ever happened to us, even if they were surprises, even if they're going to make our house even more chaotic than it already is. You know what the wildest part of this whole story is? If Christopher had chosen me at the beginning, if he'd broken off his engagement when I told him I was pregnant, if he'd done the right thing immediately, I don't think we would have made it. I wouldn't have been ready. I wouldn't have trusted it. I would have always wondered if he resented me for making him give up his merger, if he was sacrificing for obligation rather than love. The fact that he chose Victoria first, that he tried to make the dutiful choice work, that he suffered through it and realized his mistake, that's what makes this real. He knows what he gave up. He knows what he chose. There's no ambiguity. No what-ifs. He tried it the other way and hated it. Now he knows, and I know, that this life we built is exactly what he wants. Sometimes the long way is the only way to get where you're supposed to be. I've been talking for a while now. My voice is getting tired. Noelle is going to come looking for me soon, asking for a snack or help with homework or just wanting to tell me about her day. James will follow, wanting whatever his sister has. Christopher will come home from work, kiss me hello, ask what I want for dinner. Our life will continue, ordinary and extraordinary, messy and beautiful, exactly as it should be. But before I go, before I close this out, I want to leave you with something. A truth I've learned. A gift I want to give you. Ready? You are not your circumstances. You are not your mistakes. You are not what people expect you to be or who they tell you you should be. You are your choices. You are what you do when everything is falling apart. You are how you love when love is hard. You are the life you build when you stop living someone else's life and start living your own. Choose yourself. Choose truth. Choose the hard right over the easy wrong. Choose to believe you deserve good things, real things, true things. Choose to walk away from people who don't choose you back. Choose to stand firm in your worth, even when it costs you. Choose to build a life that's messy but yours over a life that's perfect but empty. And if you're pregnant and scared like I was, if you're standing in a clinic bathroom staring at two pink lines wondering how you're going to handle this, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. You're going to be okay. However this turns out, whatever you decide, whatever happens with the father or your family or your job or your life, you're going to be okay. You're stronger than you think. You're braver than you know. You're capable of more than you can imagine. That baby, if you keep them, they're going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. They're going to teach you what you're made of. They're going to show you depths of love you didn't know existed. And even if the story is hard, even if you're alone, even if nothing turns out the way you planned, you're going to look back someday and realize that moment in the bathroom was when your real life began. To everyone watching this, everyone who stuck with my story through all its messy turns, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not judging. Thank you for being here. I hope something in my story resonated with you. I hope something I said made you think or feel or decide to make a brave choice. I hope you know you're not alone in your complicated situations, your impossible choices, your messy love stories. We're all just trying our best out here. We're all making mistakes and fixing them and hoping it's enough. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I want to know you're real, that you're out there, that my story reached you. Rate this story 1 to 10 in the comments. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what resonated. Tell me your own story if you feel brave enough. And if you haven't already, subscribe to DramaCoda because next week I'm going to tell you about what happened when Christopher's mother tried to get custody of Noelle, claiming I was an unfit mother because of how Noelle was conceived. That's a whole other wild story involving lawyers and family court, and my mother threatening to fight Christopher's mother in a Walmart parking lot. You don't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you next week. Until then, choose love. Choose truth. Choose yourself. And remember, one night can change everything, but only if you're brave enough to let it. This is Jasmine Blackwell, signing off.